always tell myself that I'm going to actually start using the journals that I always buy. And I'm sure we've all seen recently all the videos making fun of us getting our planners and our pens and just trying to make sure that this year we're gonna do the bullet journal thing, right? Well, this is my attempt to actually live up to that by starting off on a good foot and making sure that I sort out my calendar while I still have that New Year ambition. Sometimes I find it difficult trying to figure out how to begin. This time I decided to go pretty standard with the usual 6-month overview that I used in my previous bullet journal. I'm actually checking it here to make sure that I'm using the right first pages that I did last year. I was able to do a good bullet journal for about 6 months. Give myself better credit, I think maybe up until November, until the holidays began and I lost any time I had to try and plan out my schedule. But hopefully this year I can do a better job and continue the pretty good streak I've had with trying to uphold bullet journal, affirmations, habit trackers, and all that very efficient things to the day. So here I'm just doing my first decorative page for 2024. A friend of my mother's once told me that she likes to pick a word for the year, a word that she's going to try and embody for the year without getting too new agey about it. And so this year I chose my word as resilience. I think that that's something I'm going to try and aspire to this year. I've never been one to be particularly good at drawing, and I really admire those who can. So for my bullet journals, I always try to use stickers and pretty tapes and other things that I can do to try and decorate it the way I would like without worrying too much about whether or not I can draw the figurines or other little drawings that would make it very decorative. I admire them and I watch those on YouTube all the time, but I am not so gifted. For me, the first few months of the year are always kind of boring. I usually just look forward to May so I can start planting things outside. I don't have a super green thumb, but I prefer to plant basil usually just to make a lot of pesto when I can. It's my favorite thing. But beyond that, the early months of the year are always so-so. Birthdays and not much else, at least for me. was trying to decide what to label this page. Affirmations is probably not the right word to use, I realize, but to call it goals is a little bit too much expectation. I don't know. When I call it goals, I feel like I'm constantly reminding myself if I am achieving it and not in the most, I guess, encouraging way to think about meeting those kinds of ideas or goals, really. So I tried to call it affirmations this year to see if that would frame it in a more positive light for me, to try and just remind myself without the pressure of a goal or a resolution, just to remind myself to try and strive towards these things. And if I can't, then to treat myself with enough grace to understand that I'm trying and that's all that matters. Here, I'm just writing out my preliminary to be read list for the year. I'm sure many more will be added on as the months progress, but for now, I just have a few that I'm trying to finish off from December and get a head start on my Goodreads reading goal for 2024. Unfortunately, for 2023, I did not hit my reading goal, and not to make it a competition, but I had challenged myself to read twice as many books as I usually do. It was 22 books. I did not make that margin by any means, so I think I read about 10 books, which is not bad. I'm also happy with that. So this year I'm setting my sights to a more manageable 12 books for the year, and maybe next year we can try and be a bit more ambitious. It's always a bit difficult for me to decide what to sew. I have a quilt that I did not finish back when I took a class in 2023, so that's probably going to be at the top of my list. It will probably take me a little while though, so we'll see. It's my first time sewing a quilt, so it will be quite the challenge, but I'm trying to debate if I should hand finish it by hand or not. Hand finish it by hand. Well, if I should finish it with my machine or by hand. Probably by hand, mostly because I don't have the type of machine that would make it easier with the longer arm to fit all the quilt underneath of it. Beyond that, probably a chemise is something else I'm looking forward to, maybe in a dark green or some other interesting type of color. Knitting is similar. I have been trying to finish this cape that I've been knitting, I think, since 2021. So I am over 2/3 of the way done. I just have to finish the bottom and largest portion before I need to knit the matching hood and then try and sew it all together. But it is mostly done, so that's a new goal to finish that finally in 2024. So what happened was I was looking at the December calendar on my iPhone when I began to write in all these dates. And so because of that, I did not correctly put in the dates for, of course, January of 2024. So I had to get inventive and fix it with these stickers here. Thankfully, I ended up liking how it looked at the end, but always double check the month that you're actually writing the dates down from. New lesson to take into 2024. Something that I like to do whenever I do my weekly spread is add in any ideas I have for meal planning for the week. I cook for myself and my family, so it's usually doubling the portion sizes that I was more used to cooking in college. This time round, I haven't cooked this coconut chicken curry soup that I love, so I'm probably going to try and cook that this week. And my lazy option too, if I don't feel up to cooking quite that much, is tuna sandwiches. Habit trackers can get quite finicky, I found, back when I try to incorporate them into my bullet journals. And if they're too intricate, I find myself not even wanting to bother to check in on myself and make sure I'm meeting those goals. So here I'm making the simplest kind of habit tracker I think I can manage, which is just writing out all of these little boxes for each day of the month, and I will go back in and just color with any color really the box, just to show if I'm making any progress on these goals. I think that's a very simple way for me to visually see that I'm actually accomplishing something and not nearly having to worry with the stress of making it the most intricate water tracker that there ever was. Very inspired by those who can do that, but I find that it just stresses me out more if it's not simple and easy to do without thinking too much about it. So here is a slightly new section that I'm going to try and incorporate this year into my bullet journal. I find that I don't really use my journal to record my daily thoughts as much anymore, but I do reach for it when I want to remember things. So lists and reminders have been very frequent additions to my past bullet journals, and so this year I wanted to incorporate a craft section. So hopefully every single time I complete a knitting or sewing project or any other kind of craft or artistic project, I can add it here into my bullet journal in a 1 or 2 page spread. Here I'm just using this semi-transparent post-it to trace over the view type of the corset that I made recently. Check out that video if you haven't already. And yep, this will just be my little way of trying to make sure that I am keeping track and being proud of myself for the goals that I am accomplishing and the crafts that I am actually ticking off my long list of things that I want to create. Here I'm recording just very basic information about the project that I just finished, mainly fabric type, how long it took me to sew it, when did I sew it, and any notes on fit if I ever wanted to try and sew it again and make any alterations that I found challenging or wanted to change simply for the next time around. If you find yourself having a crafting journal, please let me know what you record down below, because I'd be very up to changing this around. I think I could record more, but at the time this was all I could think to record. Probably have to look for inspiration on Pinterest. Here I'm using fray check on this little square of fabric that I used for the outer layer of my corset top. Fray check is just this type of adhesive or glue, essentially, that you can put on fabric to stop it from fraying. Since this little piece already started to fray, I simply drew a square with the fray check and cut a little bit outside of the glue so that it wouldn't fray anymore, and I'd be able to save this swatch in my crafting journal without any worries of it fraying over time or leaving any sort of mess. These are little corner tabs for scrapbooking, usually. You can use them to put photos or other square rectangular objects inside of scrapbooks or any type of journal. Here, the fray check made this swatch of fabric pretty stiff, so I was able to somewhat easily put it in as if it was a photo of sorts into the bullet journal this way. So I didn't have to worry about glue warping the page from the swatch itself. Here, I wanted to play around with the different textures. So washi tape and this beautiful ribbon I used in the project, trying to find a way to add it in. I ended up deciding to use these corner protectors again, since they worked so well for the fabric swatch. I did end up having to take a little piece of tape and put the ribbon down, since it's more bendable than my fabric with the fray check. But all in all, I'm happy with how that turned out. And basically, I find myself inspired to hold these swatches down because I think it's a very beautiful memory of what we make throughout the year, and I think it just brings a more tactile element towards immortalizing what you actually do as a crafter. Not to get too new agey about it again, but I think it makes it a bit more real as to what we actually create during the course of the year. And so this is just me trying to find a way to make it more impactful when I look back on it at the end of this year. And that's it. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more from this channel, please subscribe down below or leave a like on the video if it motivated you in any way to try and get back on the bullet journal train this year too. Thanks so much.